is the nature of movie making as a business for any even vaguely successful project to be rapidly considered for its franchise potential. It doesn't matter if the story ended pretty conclusively with the world saved and the hero dead after a noble sacrifice. Once those millions start rolling in, the studio suits will soon start thinking, sequel? And often it is only the objection of the original movie star that prevents some truly terrible sequel concepts from coming to fruition. The Seven sequel, 8, in which Morgan Freeman's Detective Somerset develops psychic powers to track a new killer? Yeah, that was shot down by Freeman. The Forrest Gump follow-up, in which Forrest hangs with Jenny's ghost, captures Saddam Hussein, and brings down the Berlin Wall. Yeah, that was rejected by Tom Hanks. There are, however, those rarer cases when it isn't the star that's holding the sequel back at all. In fact, the lead actor actually seems keen to throw themselves into returning to one of their signature roles with a truly bonkers new installment, and it's only the sheer weirdness of the pitch that is preventing a studio from committing to it too. But hey, if the stars are happy to commit themselves to such outlandish concepts as these 10 crazy sequels right here, then shouldn't we perhaps get a chance to see them? It sounds like fun to me, almost as much fun as you're about to have with this list right here. So I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 insane movie sequels actors actually wanted to make. Number 10, Silver Surfer. Throughout his two rather safe Fantastic Four movies, Tim Story threw Marvel's first family into a middle-of-the-road action film, downplaying any of the weirder cosmic elements of the comic to keep the scope narrow and earthbound. He turned gargantuan planet devourer Galactus into a vaguely sinister cloud. A proposed spin-off, however, would have gone in a very different direction. After doing the performance capture to portray the titular shiny board rider in sequel Rise of the Silver Surfer, star Doug Jones was excited to talk up the possibility of a solo movie for the cult favorite character. Jones, who spoke of his love of Norrin Radd at any opportunity, became even more keen on the project once Fox agreed to a pitch from Babylon 5 creator and sci-fi icon J. Michael Straczynski. In contrast to its unambitious predecessors, Straczynski's Silver Surfer script would have fully embraced the outlandish weirdness of Marvel's cosmic universe, journeying to Radd's homeworld of Zen-La to defend against a vengeful Galactus in a movie that Straczynski described as an adult sci-fi epic. Sounds bloody cool. But Fox instead went ahead with rebooting the Fantastic Four. We're not going to talk about that though. Although with the team now set to finally arrive in the MCU, the Silver Surfer will actually once again be returning to screens too. This time played by Julia Garner, with the actor playing the Shia LaBeouf version of the Surfer this time around. Now sure, it may not be the sequel that Jones necessarily wanted, but this different direction for the Surfer on the big screen at least feels rather fresh. Now what movie are you most excited for in the future, folks? You let me know in the comments section down below. Number 9, Brazzaville. It is one of the most universally beloved films of the Hollywood Golden Age, with a near-perfect bittersweet conclusion and a final line for the ages. So of course, Casablanca's producers almost immediately demanded a second part to screw all that up. Perhaps more surprisingly though, Humphrey Bogart was actually up for it. Shortly after Casablanca made it big in 1943, Warner Brothers announced a sequel, Brazzaville, named for the free French city to which Claude Rains' Captain Renault suggests they now go in the original film's final scene. They also announced that actors including Bogart and Sidney Greenstreet would be returning. But the movie, which made it as far as a story treatment from Flash Gordon's Frederick Stefani, would have dismantled much of what made its predecessor great with almost surgical precision. Starting where Casablanca concluded, it would have revealed that Renault and Bogart's Rick were secret agents for the Allies all along, and gone on to reunite Rick and Ingrid Bergman's Ilsa and give them a romantic happily ever after, essentially completely nullifying the end of the original. What? But while Bogart was only too happy to sign on for more, and ended up making the not dissimilar Passage to Marseille with Rains, Greenstreet, and Casablanca director Michael Curtiz, Bergman was less keen, and without her, Warner ended up passing on Stefani's treatment. And that, perhaps fortunately, was the end of attempts to make a direct Casablanca sequel. Whew. Number 8, How the Nightmare on Elm Street Began. Look, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise has been going on for long enough that you could make a whole, arguably more interesting series out of the pitches that it rejected, with some of them even coming from the cast themselves. Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, for example, told an interviewer in 2016 that the series should be rebooted with children today constructing their own mental image of Freddy from the urban legends that were still told. As each child would imagine a different Freddy, he would be played in each dream by a completely different actor. Imaginarium of Dr. Panassa style. Compelling stuff. John Saxon, who played the cop, Lieutenant Thompson, who was the father to final girl Nancy, went one further and actually penned his own prequel treatment back in 1987 while appearing in sequel The Dream Warriors. In How the Nightmare on Elm Street Began, it would be revealed that the original Springfield murders were actually committed by Charles Manson, that one of the victims was a never-before-mentioned elder daughter of Saxon's own character, Nancy's stepsister, and that her therapist, one Frederick Krueger, was wrongfully suspected of the crimes. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the producers, who also rejected Wes Craven's own suggestion for a fourth film involving time travel in dreams, did not go with Saxon's idea, opting for the safer ground of Rennie Harlan's more derivative The Dream Master. And Saxon would not return to the franchise until a self-referential turn in postmodern sequel New Nightmare. Number 7. Crank 3D. Long before he was a part of the wildly nonsensical world of the Fast and the Furious, Jason Statham established his credentials for cartoonishly madcap thrill rides with the literally adrenaline-driven Crank. What a mad old movie that was. While promoting oddball Nicolas Cage horror Mom and Dad, director Brian Taylor said he was actually committed to making a third Crank, but only if it was as exponentially weirder as Crank 2 was to Crank 1. And given that the second film, Crank High Voltage, tagline "He was dead but he got better," featured Statham's Chev Chelios doing everything from having sex on a racetrack to setting himself on fire to keep his artificial heart charged, that promises a movie which is pretty damn weird. Taylor and his Crank co-director Mark Neveldine have, in the past, suggested that the eye-popping craziness would this time be served up in glorious 3D, with the latter also suggesting such possible plots as Crank Hungry Heart, in which Chelios' heart is replaced by an alien organism which needs to feed on flesh to survive. Oh my. Fortunately, one man who has always been a consistent cheerleader for getting a third Crank made has been Statham himself, sharing his enthusiasm for going back for some higher voltage with his spy director Paul Feig when on the promotional tour for the latter, and bringing it up again while doing interviews for The Fate of the Furious. So who knows, there could be life in this alien heart yet. Fingers crossed. Number 6, The Bodyguard II. Despite poor critical notices, The Bodyguard was one of the smash hits of the early 1990s, and, powered by star Whitney Houston's rendition of the Dolly Parton hit I Will Always Love You, became the best-selling movie soundtrack of all time too. With Houston, always a bigger draw as a musical superstar than an actor, proving the movie's big selling point just by playing a very loosely fictionalized version of herself, the plan for a sequel was simply to do the same with another troubled celebrity not widely known for her acting ability. Producer and star Kevin Costner had his eye on a particularly left-field choice for this role too, Princess Diana. Yep. The movie would see Costner's Secret Service agent turned bodyguard tasked with protecting Diana, really stretching herself with the role of a princess stalked by the paparazzi. Despite having never previously professed an interest in acting, the erstwhile Princess of Wales was apparently on board with the project, having been sold on the idea by Duchess of York Sarah Ferguson, even discussing the possibility of intimate romantic scenes with Costner. Costner and his writers had a version of the script prepared specifically tailored to Diana in August 1997. Unfortunately for anybody hoping to see this bizarre sequel though, that was the month in which the real-life obsessive attentions of the press led to a chase through Paris which ended in the real-life princess death. Thanks for stopping by to watch this insane video today, my friend, and if you're enjoying yourself then hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these What Culture videos in your life. Number 5. Space Conair. As anyone from Jason Voorhees to Machete to the Leprechaun could tell you, when you really need to shoot for the stars in the bonkers sequel stakes, you've got to literally blast off into space. And if everything had gone to plan, then that could also have been the path of Nicolas Cage's gloriously mulleted Cameron Poe in the proposed follow-up to Conair. The ludicrous 90s action classic saw a bunch of indie actors hamming it up as a plane full of convicts. And at the time, director Simon West proposed a sequel sequel, Con Airport, in which, despite the failings of the flying prisoners plan in the first movie, John Cusack's US Marshal Vince Larkin now operated a full airport for prison transfers. Cusack shot the idea down at the time, saying that he had only made the first movie for the money and was not at all interested in it. In 2012, however, with West talking up a sequel once again, Cusack used the promotional tour for his movie The Raven to admit that he would find a return to Conair a fun idea that he would be up for doing. And West's new sequel idea? Poe and Larkin are trapped outside of Earth's atmosphere, having to deal with a spaceship full of Cyrus the Virus and his original team of convicts, reincarnated as futuristic super convicts, for reasons that probably make about as much sense as Conair ever did. And now we all want to see this movie, don't we? Number 4, Star Trek VI, In Flanders Fields. After a quarter of a century on screen and 5 previous movies, story ideas for the original Star Trek cast were running a bit thin by the 1990s, and the executives at Paramount were only too happy to listen to the cast's own suggestions, before eventually opting for Leonard Nimoy's idea about bringing an equivalent to post-Cold War détente to the age-old Federation-Klingon rivalry. Star Trek VI very nearly took an odder, darker tone from the mind of Walter Koenig, better known as the Enterprise's navigator Pavel Chekhov. Koenig presented a story outline whose name, taken from John McCrae's First World War remembrance poem, provides a pointer to its downbeat approach. In contrast to Nimoy's story about the end of conflict, In Flanders Fields would have taken place during a full-on Romulan-Klingon war, during which the old Enterprise crew have to come out of retirement to rescue their replacements from a planet of monstrous alien worms. Koenig described the creatures as things that the monsters in Aliens evolved from, so his story could have been the closest thing to a Star Trek horror film. In place of Kirk's death at the end of the actual Star Trek VI, Koenig's version would have killed off virtually the entire cast, including himself, leaving just Spock and Bones to survive. Talk about a bold pitch. Perhaps it's that latter point that made Paramount pass on this entry in a franchise they still wanted to milk further. Number 3, Alien 3. Chekhov wanting to be eaten by alien worms wasn't even the weirdest 90s sci-fi franchise sequel that its actors wanted to make, though. Nope, that honor has to go to the Alien 3 pitch that Sigourney Weaver enthusiastically described as very original and arresting, with Aliens doing an excellent job of showing exactly how a sequel should be done by taking the original horror film's material into a different action movie genre. Both producers Walter Hill and David Giler and Weaver herself wanted to push things further with the third part. Hill approached New Zealand director Vincent Ward after the success of his surreal medieval movie The Navigator. Ward returned with a story about a hollow wooden planet filled with monks who think that the xenomorph is the devil once Ripley crash lands there with one. We would have seen a chest burster burst from inside a sheep, a poor sheep, and aliens stalking through wheat fields, all beneath the surface of this gothic wooden world. Lots of concept art was drawn up, along with plans to build a giant wooden Gothic cathedral set 100 meters tall in which to film. Even though Weaver was far more excited for Alien meets The Name of the Rose than she would be about going through the same motions again in the sequels that we did get, executives at Fox were less keen on something so out there. Boo. Instead, they crunched Ward's script together with a Prison Planet one from Pitch Black's David Twohy and made it into David Fincher's lackluster Alien 3. Number 2, Roger Rabbit Toon Platoon. From its mix of suggestive adult film noir and silly cartoon slapstick to getting Daffy and Donald Duck to share the screen, Who Framed Roger Rabbit did an incredible job of marrying some very disparate elements into something truly great. For a possible sequel, the plan was to go for an even weirder mashup as the Toon underclass shipped out to fight the Nazis. Yeah, that's right. A prequel giving an origin story for Roger and Jessica Rabbit. Toon Platoon would have seen Roger first coming to a Hollywood in which the segregation parallels in the separation of Toons and humans were played up even further. Then war breaks out and a whole host of familiar Looney Tunes and Disney characters are conscripted to fight in Europe, thanks to them being practically indestructible. Jessica, meanwhile, first meets Roger when working for a radio show. Her producer turns out to be a Nazi spy, and she is kidnapped and turned into an anti-American propaganda pin-up, prompting Roger to mount a daring Seeking a rescue. Of course, as a prequel, Bob Hoskins in the original movie's human cast would not be returning, but the Toon cast would. Charles Fleischer, Roger's voice actor, was particularly keen to come back for this weird follow-up, whose final reveal would have been that the father who abandoned Roger as a baby was none other than Bugs Bunny. That's what's up, Doc. Producer Steven Spielberg shot down the idea, though, as making Schindler's List had thoroughly turned him against the idea of the Nazis as fun or comedic villains. Yeah, fair enough. And number 1, Gladiator II. Ridley Scott's sequel to Gladiator, focusing on the now adult Lucius, is finally about to hit screens, baby. If original star Russell Crowe had his way, though, we could have seen a far crazier second installment. Goth rock legend Nick Cave revealed that Crowe approached him personally to ask him to write a sequel, even though Cave's only screenwriting credit at the time was as one of 5 credited writers on 1988's Ghosts of the Civil Dead. Hey Russell, didn't you die in Gladiator? Cave said he had asked. Yeah, you sort that out, was apparently Crowe's response. Right then. And Cave very much sorted it out in his own idiosyncratically bizarre way. His sequel script begins with Crowe's Maximus in a bleak afterlife, where he is confronted by the old, decaying Roman gods, who want him to deal with the threat of the rise of a more popular, powerful new god. Maximus then gets brought back to life and thrown into the conflict between early Christians and Romans, following which a now essentially immortal Maximus continues to fight his way through every other historical conflict from the Crusades to the Vietnam War. It was apparently a comment on the endless cycle of violence perpetuated by Maximus never choosing non-violent resistance. Okay. Although Cave's script did involve a massive mock naval battle in a flooded Colosseum, you know, a lot like the one seen in trailers for the Gladiator II that we're actually gonna get, at no point did the resurrected Maximus ever do any actual gladiator thing. Even if it has no immortal endless wars and weird theology, at least the Gladiator II that did happen is giving us that. And that's all we really want from a film called Gladiator, right?